we're keeping track of the attributes. These were the different requirements that we had. And then if we kept going with it, this is what we just put together, right? We have our different entities and the attributes that are associated with each and the relationships. And at this point, our ERD is complete. And from here, we're ready to move on to physical modeling, right? And then from here, we just ask ourselves, we have our logical model. How are we going to implement this to implement the ERD in a database? So how do we create our schema? And we basically ask ourselves, what are the data types, the primary and foreign key relationships, constraints needed, and so on. Again, I mentioned we're not going to do the whole whiteboarding exercise for this because it would basically be me again going through and just writing down data types. So just to save some time, this is what you would end up with, where this is basically the complete physical model schema you have. And it's basically kind of what we did there, where the attributes, all of them are basically what we just went through and put in our logical and conceptual modeling step in our complete ERD. And the only differences here are adding in what's the primary key, what's the foreign key, and the data types, right? And then as you're doing this, most of the data types are pretty self-explanatory. So things that say date is going to be a date time. Most other things, you can just leave it as a varchar. Things that are numbers, you can likely leave it as integers. Here I had the late fee per day. I put that as a float in case there's going to be multiple, it might be a decimal number, and so on. So I wouldn't worry. So in an actual interview, you likely aren't going to be worried too much about getting the exact details of specific data types. It's more the modeling and seeing how they relate to each other. And the only other difference between this, again, is instead of having the one-to-many relationships now we have the arrows pointing from the foreign key to the primary key that they're going to be joining to. Because again, this is what's going to tell the data engineers who are implementing the database how they're going to construct the DDL statements. Okay, so I would kind of pause the video here, kind of take a look through this, make sure you understand it. But again, it's not too different from the exercise we just went through in logical modeling, right? Just added in the data types to get our complete schema, which we have complete here. Okay, and again, so if you think remember back to the question, it said one of the requirements for this was to create the DDL statements, right? So before we do that, we're actually going to do just a quick recap on, in general, what DDL statements, constraints, and table design entails.